I agree with that. Also, I did a ranking the other day on me personally, the best presidential smiles, and this is where they came. I told you this, but yeah, let me tell you what they are. Trump.
Go ahead, tell me what
Okay,
you like the smile.
no particular order, but these are the presidents in my lifetime that I think have the best smiles. I vote them. These are my tops: Trump, Reagan, Jimmy Carter, Biden, and there was another one, and I'm trying to figure out who it might be. Like somebody said, there's a joke about, a friend of mine told me a joke about Bill Clinton. He said, have you ever noticed how whenever Bill Clinton is smiling, it always looks like he's got a secret he's glad that you don't know about?
He was, he was a very good speaker too. He's very persuasive.
Yeah, he was. He's a preacher. He sounded like a preacher.
Yeah, he was very much, gosh, that's a hard one because I really think that, yeah, he had a great smile, but to me it seems like to do that job you all kind of have to. And I like George W. as a person, but he didn't always have the greatest smile. Sometimes poor guy, it was a stressful time when he was president. It looked like sometimes the poor guy had hemorrhoids, but now that he's not president, he sure as hell looks like he has a good smile.
Yeah, and I'm differentiating between a smile that I would say, wow, that looks great in a portrait, versus I'm glad he's smiling. Because every president in some way smiles, but what I'm saying is, if you look at them, like I'll tell you who has a good smiles back in the day, Eric Estrada. Remember and Trump, when he smiles, man, he looks like, wow, he should be like modeling. He looks like he'd be a model, for smiles.
He was a very good-looking dude when he was younger. People as they get older, we're not good-looking.
And I think that one of the reasons why I do comedy, and I have kind of looked and said, well, this is the reason for comedy in society. It's because what George Carlin points out, somebody has to point out what we're stepping in, because we're literally stepping in poop all around us. We're walking around with poop. We're walking through the house and nobody's pointing it out. It's like the emperor has no clothes. And Carlin and comedians pointed out. The comedians pointed out. And as a Christian comedian, I try to point out comedy in the church, in the body of Christ, starting with myself. And then if anybody else in the non-church wants to hear it and laugh, that's good too. But I'm not doing it to be mean to other Christians or to be mean to people that have a different, as they would say, belief system than I have. It's just because I've noticed some things about my own life, in my life now and in my former life, that are absurdly funny and sometimes not funny. They're, as Trump would say, sad, because it makes me an anti-Christ Christian, in my opinion. And as I said,
people shouldn't have to explain, and it seems like it's unfortunate that we have to.
Yep.
But I think there's a way you can even do it without explaining, to let people know where you're coming from. It's like, because we've talked about this before. We have to remember, and even years ago I realized, the average population, the average people, they don't think like comedians do. Some do, some don't. But they're not going to always understand where you're coming from. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean, it's just that we do come from a perspective that is different from whether it's the majority of people or just in general. We come from sort of the same place, but we take it further. And like I said, people think the stuff we do, but they don't take it. We're a little more outside the box than the average person. And if we're controlling the roller coaster, we want the audience to go on our ride. And it's like, we don't want them jumping out of the roller coaster,
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah, finish the ride. Otherwise, they might actually get hurt mentally if they don't finish the ride. Yeah, agreed.
Whoa, that's a deep analogy.
It is. If you look at the roller coaster analogy, there is a start, there is a middle, and the middle is all over, and then there's an end. The start is the instructions. Everybody put your seatbelts on, you're in for a ride, blah, blah, blah. And usually the reason, as you pointed out, I'd never thought of this before. It's even though it's obvious, most people don't think like, quote, the comedian, end quote, because, and otherwise, this is demonstrated by, that's why that comedy is a thing in the first place. I mean, if everyone was a comedian, you know, it would be like, remember the movie Incredibles? And then the guy, the syndrome, said, everybody will have powers, and then when everybody's super, no one will be. And my feeling is, if everyone had the same mentality of, you know, George Carlin or Robin Williams or Dangerfield or whoever, or even you and me on a different level, as in the sense that we look at the world as comedians, we would all be the same, and nobody would even want to listen to us. But
people do have to get offended on some level. I think that can be a good thing because comedy has to do that. But it's, like you said, it's like don't jump out of the roller coaster yet. Sit in it, you know, and then you can comment later. It's like, you know, where are you coming from? So certain jokes, like people say, well, you shouldn't joke about, like, say, somebody was like molested or something. Yeah, I don't joke about that, but it's like people have pain from things that have happened, whether it's a death or they've been emotionally scarred. They use the pain as therapy, you know, to get over what they've been through. Negative into a positive.
It's a hot button item, but it's necessary to talk about, including among people that, you know, you wouldn't normally think of as this, but everybody deals with this on some level, in some way. We all know someone, maybe, or we saw it in the movies or on TV, whether they're car dealers or car salesmen or Congress members or they work at Domino's or whether they're Republicans or Democrats, but everyone that's ever had harm done to them, I feel sometimes they are the ones that can, you know, broach the subject and say, oh, speaking of being molested,
you say the wrong thing, and that's, like I said, there's nothing funny about that. But things that you've worked through have given me the ability to laugh again. That's what I'm saying. I'm not
of course, yeah. But I hope that what I would do is, like, where you go to those areas, like you go to the homes and the community centers and the burn centers and the hospitals, and you let those people tell you how the comedy is going to be and how it's going to go. And you are really good at taking your audience and going, okay, I'm going to do this here. I can do this here. I can do this here. You're good at that. You're very versatile. You're one of the most versatile professionals I know and seen on the stage.
You know, and it's not about, you know, I mean, if you don't like something, you'll tell me.
Yeah, and it's not that everybody's going to laugh till they're peeing their pants at every joke everybody tells, unless maybe someday would. Dangerfield, I almost do. And let me ask you this.
Yeah, Dangerfield is very good because he is just like...
Yeah, and we'll get to Dangerfield in a minute, but let me ask you...
But he was on it. I mean, just like one after another, dude. And he was just a classic genius. I mean, I don't even have words for his comedy. And see, Carlin was a little different in that perspective. That, yes, he was funny, but didn't always piss in the pants make you laugh. It was more, you know, Williams is kind of a little bit of Dangerfield and Carlin in the sense that he could entertain and make you think. That's why Williams was a comedian.
Funny.
And I want to say his too, because to me they're always a lot. I don't care. I don't judge them for what they, you know. I know Williams killed himself, but you know, I don't judge him for that because I know they are all in a place, and you know, it happens. They get in their worst. Comedians aren't always the happiest people, but that's why they use comedy to deal with those tragedies, to deal with those things that are painful. You know.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of comedy. That's why I love it because you know, you take the shit and you make it better by facing it. And by making a joke. Some people think, well, that's not really dealing with it. Like Dr. Phil said that. Like, Dr. Phil, you're not a doctor and you're not a comedian. Like, that just, I don't want to go there with the negative shit, but that just kind of got to me that he would say, well, blah, blah, blah. I'm going, dude, if comedians didn't have comedy when he killed himself long
what is the difference? Let's don't look at this for a second. We talked about this a minute ago, but what is the difference, do you think, between provoking, as in causing someone to go, whoa, what was that? And think about it, versus offending? Is there a difference? Do you think some people go out to offend, or do you think some people go to just provoke and it accidentally offends? And do you think there's a difference? I think it's careful. I'm careful to try not to offend.
I think many times people choose to get offended. Now I'm talking about the reaction. I'm thinking about the reaction response of the person. But I will get to the motive of the comedian in a second. But I think the motive of the comedian is, yeah, sometimes they do that. However, I don't think that's their initial reason they want to get into comedy. And I can only speak from my own perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But what I see is the reason we want to make people laugh and feel better. But if people are jerks about it and they want to get bothered by every little thing, it's like, well, I can understand there are some boundaries you don't cross. People don't like being, picked on, whatever. That's fine. But what you have to do is you have to realize, comedians sometimes can be dickheads, but they're only human. So sometimes, yeah, they choose to be a little bit that way. Mm-hmm. I don't think they mean to, but I think generally 99% of the time we're in it. But we're human. We're fallen by nature. So sometimes we go in with the point of, I'm going to offend somebody tonight. I don't give a crap.
Yeah, and you because that's kind of like, instead of going and getting in a fight at a bar, you could just go and just offend somebody on stage and nobody really got hurt. I buy that. I am into it. Because me being a non-fighter, I'm not into that. I would rather get on stage and but I don't go out of my way to try to offend people, but to each their own. I think a lot of people do end up getting offended like I used to, because they just don't know how to get up and leave the room, or they don't know how to accept that, hey, maybe this comedy is just not for me.
Right, but you have to know, and I heard this, I think it was Bobby Slayton said this. You go to SeaWorld, you sit in the front, you're going to get wet, right?
Yep.
It's basically like that. Comedy is, you're going to go, they're going to say something you probably don't like. But if you really look at what they're saying, it could be to your benefit. It's like if somebody goes to me, yeah, well, you don't have a girlfriend sitting with you tonight. Well, what is it? Because you're picking your nose and you're chewing ice real loud and, I don't know, chewing on a straw, whatever, scratching your groin. I don't know. It's like I can choose to get offended or laugh, but I'm willing to look at myself and go, yeah, there's probably a lot of reasons why I'm single. But you know what? That's up to me to be single, and that's up to me to get offended by what somebody's saying. So I choose. We all have a choice in life, and 99% of the time, we can change things. There's some things we can't change. I have a comedian friend, and he's really funny, and you should have him on your show sometime. His name's Ricky G, and he's a cancer survivor, and he's in a wheelchair, and he makes jokes about it because he said, God told him, you're going to share your story with others and inspire others. But our pain, we need to choose to overcome it. And that's how we overcome it, by humor. They talk about, the senses of smelling, sense of eating, sense of taste. I said senses of eating. Jesus, no wonder I'm a fat ass. No.
Dude, you got a sense of eating.
Right? No, I'm actually, and I'm going to tell people, well, I'm trying to lose weight. Okay, I am losing a little bit. You know how weight is,
Well, I mean,
not get fat. No, I just made up a sense.
You are a little further along than the average Joe, in the sense that the comedian is almost ahead of the game, because they're already crazy in the sense of the way they see the world. So you're less likely to be offended than the average person. So respectfully, and I say this to myself, that's easy for us to say to the people that aren't comedians, to say, well, get over it and don't be offended. I think the way you're doing it is correct, where you go to the groups that need support in different ways, and you we would say maybe they got hurt or maybe they have an issue, but your support of them through comedy is not to just walk into a random audience and tell the same joke to every audience. You look at your audience and you pinpoint it. Oh, like if you were a hunter, you wouldn't go hunting for an elephant with a bow and arrow, right? You have to use a certain kind of whatever it is. I'm not advocating elephant hunting, so everybody just take it easy out there. But there you go. It's a perfect example.
That you'd be a Republican if you're an elephant, right?
Of course, yeah. What about the audience? Is it up to the performer when they get booked to say, what's the audience? Or that's up to the producer to know that, right? Because if you get booked on a show and it wasn't a right fit for the audience, that's not your fault. I wouldn't say. I think that was the fault of the person that booked it in the sense of it's their responsibility. And if the audience doesn't like the comedy, that's not your fault as the performer. That's the responsibility of the person that booked the show. They should have known the audience.
And I've seen shows where they said this is a clean show. And yeah, the clean shows I've seen dirty. The funny thing is, I will get into this because I've seen shows where they say they're dirty shows that are cleaner than when they've said there's going to be clean shows. But sometimes you get people mad when they're a clean show and then somebody gets dirty. But then sometimes when they're expecting it to be clean and a comedian gets a little dirty, they actually laugh a little more because they don't expect it. But to me, I mean, you have, comedy night, Latino night, all black night. They even did an Anglo-Saxon attraction, and to me, all women show and all this, that. I say, let's just make it a comedy show.
Me too.
But I want comedy to be diverse. Don't get me wrong. I don't want it to be all just, I like
boring. Boring. If it was all the same, it'd all be boring.
But see, that's my whole thing. You're not going to have 4 or 5 George Carlins in one night. You want to get variety. Not that those comedians aren't great, but you've got to have variety because
good point.
Boring. So
herein lies the challenge.
I'm going on something that's maybe a little different than what you were asking. So you were going into, is it the booker's fault if the comedian? It's a little bit of everything, and I think we need to remember that. And this is where you can let go of your ego and show some humility. Comedy is about the show. It's not just you. I mean, it's even the wait staff. It's even the guy in the front or girl. Oh, I got to be gender. I can't be offensive. I got to be gender neutral. The woman, whoever's in the front. I can't say Miss. I have to say Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head because I don't want to offend somebody. Or non-binary potato. Not even person because it can't be potato person. So non-binary potato thing. Whatever.
Right. Yeah, grab them by the potato.
Now I'm calling it a thing, so somebody's going to get offended. But
that's the nature of the game, as it should be in our business.
A booker has to have a passion for what they're doing. And they have to say, this person, they have to think with their mind, body, and soul. And they have to go, this person is right for this gig. And yes, it's up to them to know who they're being in advance. Because some comedians, they're hilarious. And if I had a dirty show, an old adult show, I know some places where certain people would smash it, and I know some people I'd just be like, I'm not having that person there because, they're going to say stuff. They're going to say stuff, and it's going to lose the audience. You don't want to have, Andrew. I mean, you could have Andrew Dice Clay at church, I guess, if you did a clean set, but,
I have an opinion on that. I'll respond to that in a minute. Go ahead. You're saying a lot of stuff, Brian, to get my brain going.
People at college get more offended by Andrew Dice Clay, so there you go. I don't.
There has been a shift. The shift in tone, even it's a paradigm shift, I think, for churches, as I would see it, given that my finger is on the pulse of, I call it TV Christians. I don't call it real Christians because everything on TV and the internet is fake, even if it's real. But,
fake news. There you go.
But the thing is, what I've noticed is, and this is where I think everyone plays a part on the team. We're all on the same team in that we're on the team of comedians. And also we're on the same team in that we're all on the same boat in that we're all on the earth. We all have to make it, and we're all going to live on the earth for about, on average, naturally speaking, if something horrible doesn't happen, or not horrible, but just the way it works, some people will live to be 60, 70, 80, 90, 110 these days. And then I would say oh, well, this means that we're all kind of doing the same thing, but different people in different parts of the boat have different jobs. And the comedian has the job of whatever it is that they have. And I think that for us, one of the things we bring is the mentality of variety and diversity without making it a rule and dogma. But we live in a world where a society, our particular world, not the whole world, but our, let's call it America, where we have these rules where it is acceptable to say this and not acceptable to say that. And if you said the wrong thing 20 years ago, you're going to get in trouble these days now. So it's not easy, but I do think the key for being a good comedian is to not be offended yourself. That's the start. I think for me, when I look in the mirror, I say, I'm not trying to tell, George Carlin what to do, or Michael Jr. what to do, or Brian Petrasek what to do. What I'm doing is I'm looking at Randy and I'm saying, or my stage name, Sarandel, what is my act? What is my role? And I say that my role is filling this job, pointing out to Christians how we as Christians can do a better job as following Christ, and then also laugh at ourselves when we're acting like we are when obviously we're not, And it's not that I'm saying, oh, thou shalt be like me. What I'm saying is, hey, look, I noticed something funny. Let me point it out and see if you laugh. And if you don't think it's funny, great. But Andrew Dice Clay, I think, is a perfect example of I think his material is just as relevant for anybody that claims to be a Christian, no matter what zip code or denomination, if they like it. And I'm not going to sit and say, because I don't like something or say it's not funny, nobody should listen. I just don't happen to think some Christians want to step outside of the box of the label clean Christian comedy, even though a lot of the Christian comedians that I see aren't even doing Christian comedy. They're just making jokes about people that they don't agree with. And I would say that's fine, but I would hold the Christian up to the standard of George Carlin, and I would say Carlin made fun of everybody, the secular, the religious, the non-religious, milk cartons, everybody. And I'm finding that Christian comics today are not doing that job, and I find it a deficiency, but it's not my role to tell them to change. It's my role to do that job myself. I see the need, I do it. So variety, speaking of variety, and here's where I might fall into a different category than most Christians, and maybe not, I'm not saying I do, but I might, at least comedians, generally speaking, is that I noted that a lot of Christian comedians market themselves as not being dirty or like Robin Williams, quote unquote. They'll watch a Robin Williams clip and I'll read it and they'll say, well, they'll assume that anyone who uses a cuss word or something that sounds weird to them or makes a joke about the Bible is automatically not suited for or fit for Christian churches. I disagree. I think the reason that churches are in such bad shape in general is because they've gone the way of a lot of university classrooms where they've just kind of, in many ways they've opened up, but in many ways they've just opened up to being mean to a lot more people out loud. Not everybody. Not everyone. I'm only talking about comedians. Yeah. Well, and the point was, because I don't want to leave that said without qualifying it and saying, I'm not saying that Christians are like this, because I'm a Christian. What I'm saying is a lot of Christian comedians, as I have now found out on YouTube and the internet, they are looking a little bit more like the edgier type, in the sense of, well, we're going to get edgy. We're going to start joking outside of the Christian, quote unquote, teaching. But then they'll do things like, they'll make jokes about anyone that they don't agree with politically, not in a funny way where they always poke fun at themselves, but they'll do it in a way that, I'm not going to say most Christians, but there are a lot of Christians on the internet that...
And they're afraid of that, and I can understand for in some sake, but I knew a guy who would take it as far as, I'm not saying his name, and he's a good comedian. He's great at what he does, but he had a Christian comedy show, and he didn't want comedians to do dirty stuff on the side, which I thought was kind of crap, because it's like, I'm not going to book you if you have a video where you cuss on YouTube or whatever, because people are going to look you up and they're not going to like it. And I'm going, I don't know. I mean, it's your thing. Dude, what you see in church is not that person. And what I mean by that is people think and say and do everything that everybody else has done pretty much. We all have logs in our eyes, and we need to be for real about this. We can't lie and say we're some perfect person. We're not. Our nature is that we're fallen, and, you know, we all are, and that doesn't mean we're bad. It doesn't mean we're evil or whatever. It's just, like you said, Christians, we need to be able to look at ourselves and go, hey, we're all sinners, you know?
That's my opinion. Yep.
You know?
I agree with you, and that's why I do what I do. Some people do what they do for this reason or whatever, and everybody has their own delivery style. I just find that my best audience is the Christians, even though, as you've seen, they're not always the most receptive. That's fine. I find that a lot of times most Christians will ask me after the show, are you really a Christian? And most people that aren't Christians, they don't care. They're not concerned about that. But I know
no, and I can see why, but I think a lot of Christians probably have been where you're at. They just don't want to admit it.
Yeah,
but a lot of them have had doubts and thoughts, and it's just...
Yeah, they do have doubts, and I still have them every day. You were saying a lot of Christians probably were where I am, but they don't want to admit it, or they can't. Yeah, to each their own, and I have my doubts, and live and let live, and die and let die, because we're only on this earth for 100 or so years at tops, and that we can do the best we can while we're here.